Hello, Opening Pathways viewers. It's Tom Lenoble, and I'm excited to be with you today. I have Todd James with us. Todd is the CEO of Aurora Insights, which we're going to learn a little bit about Aurora and a lot about Todd. Todd, welcome to Opening Pathways.
Tom, it's great to be here and thank you for having me.
So you are most welcome, and we are thrilled. So tell me this. We'd love to know a little bit about your business and what sparked your idea to start it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, the company is called Aurora Insights. I started about a year ago, and we work with executive teams, boards, investors, and private equity, really around the problem of how, two problems. One is how do you get value from your artificial intelligence investments in a way that really shows up materially and moves the business ahead? And two, how do you do it in a way that actually brings the workforce along and your customer base along? So that people element to it. And so, it started out of a passion of mine. I was in a very good role a year ago, leading artificial intelligence for the Kroger company. And I was chief data and analytics or chief data and technology officer at 8451, their data science, retail media, and insights business. And before that, I was at Fidelity, where I was one of the individuals that led the build out of their artificial intelligence. And when I left, I was leading all the cross enterprise AI. And what I learned is, having been able to drive value in those organizations and hearing these stories and seeing where it's not happening and seeing the implications of what happens when companies are left behind in this technology. I thought it was time to go out and take some of that knowledge and expertise and democratize it. And candidly, I had a bit of an entrepreneurial itch since I left the military. I was in the Coast Guard and decided it was time. So it was not easy to leave, but it's been quite a journey, and I'm loving it. Able to have a big impact while also grow as a person and a professional through the experience.
Thank you. And you just brought back a fond memory, Todd. I haven't had an uncle who spent his whole life in the Coast Guard, so I'd forgotten all about him and the Coast Guard till you just said.
We could take the next hour and talk about the
I
Coast Guard.
bet we could. I bet we could. So tell me this, have you had the moment yet where you've said to yourself, yes, I know this is my path with your new business?
Well, I know it is or isn't my
It
path.
is.
Yes, it's interesting. I think there's a few things, and I'll start with the business, and then I'll get into the personal. I had a thesis around the need, and it takes a while. You're trying to figure out how do you fit, where do you position yourself in the market, what's the right place to play. But it probably took me somewhere around 6 months to really kind of prove out and see that there was traction around that thesis. But what I'm finding is really on two fronts. One, the mechanics of how you drive this change, how you leverage artificial intelligence to be able to have an impact. That's part of it. But there's also the human dynamic. At the end of the day, you're talking to people who have to make decisions, that have to get their leadership teams aligned, that have to get their people on board. So, where it came for me, I was having a few discussions where I'd have it in group settings, and then the Zoom or the Teams would go down. Then it would pop back up, and it would just be the CEO or just be one of the leaders, and you'd have a much more candid discussion around what they were going through. And that was the validation point for me. Now, there's a lot of learnings around how do you do that and where do you do it. And, like every entrepreneur, you go through and you're always iterating and making improvements and refining. But I think those heart to heart discussions really reinforced to me that there was a need. On a personal level, I ran into one of my high school buddies, oddly enough. I moved back to where I grew up a few years ago. So not the same community, but same town. And I was on the other side of town in the grocery store on a Sunday, and I ran into a guy I knew in high school, and I've seen him a few times since then. And the rumor with my high school people is I guess I left and retired. Um, and I don't stay in touch very well. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But what for me I found is it's not at all that. It's the same kind of hours I had as a senior executive at a firm, if not more. But when you say is it the right thing, my energy levels, my joy, the inquisitiveness, the learning, the energy that comes from doing this is different for me, and I hear about it from my wife. I hear about it from people that are close to me. So you get that feedback and you know you made the right decision, even though it's a hard one. You walk away from a lot. And so there's always a little bit of what did I do? But I can tell you at this point, there's no doubt in my mind it was the right move, and I'm loving it.
Has that led you to a belief about yourself that you've outgrown now since you've moved into this arena of working for yourself in your own business?
I think it reaffirms something for me. Like I have been inquisitive and restless my entire career. I don't think I've been in a role more than 4 years ever. Um, I was a sailor in the Coast Guard, yeah, on ships and running missions. Went and I was a CIO at a mid-sized firm coming out of that. And then I went to Deloitte and worked across lots of different industries. And I was at Fidelity for 15 years, but every 2 to 4 years, I would be the individual that kind of tap on the shoulder and say, this is broken or it's ambiguous. And I'd go in, set a strategy, diagnose it, set a strategy, and run it for a few years to get it to results. So this restlessness, this desire to learn something new, even the move to Kroger, I'm in a great position at Fidelity, and all of a sudden you're like, I got to learn retail. So what's on Sundays? You're going to grocery stores and you're going to competitors and you're reading and you're learning and you're doing all this. So I have this internal restlessness around wanting to constantly reinvent myself. And there's a Latin phrase that came to me, and I don't believe things come to you haphazard. I think it came to a reason. And I'm sitting with a friend of mine, we're at an event, and the term nucepe, which my Latin is horrible, so that could be the wrong way to say it, but I don't plan to go back to ancient Rome for vacation, so I think that's okay. But it's basically I begin again. And I love the idea that no matter who you are today, no matter what life is doing for you, good or tragic, you have an opportunity to be something different, to be something hopefully better. And I define better as having, being able to contribute to people's lives in a way that is good for them and good for society. So yeah, I think I reinforced even at this late stage in my career, I have that inquisitiveness and restlessness that
Yeah,
continues to drive me and
here,
light that
here you
fire.
are again, Todd, bringing back memories. I took Latin, a bunch of years of Latin, and you're now making me remember that. Today's going to be this podcast is challenging Tom's memory, I think, as we're
Well, I'm going to do that now. Did I say it correctly?
I don't
I go to
know.
Google every now and then and do it, but I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
don't know. I don't remember much of that Latin. I remember Vidi Vici Vinci, or whatever it was, and
Yeah.
I know that helped me tremendously in understanding words and breaking down words. And even in other countries, I'll see a word occasionally, and it will spark me to at least have an understanding of the word. So I think it was useful.
But the old adage back in the day was it'll help you on your SATs. I took German instead. I live in that part of the country where people still speak that in corners. But did it help? Like, did you max your SAT?
No,
No,
no.
Latin wasn't
Uh,
that helpful.
Now you're bringing up a bad memory, Todd. Tell me this. I think most of us look back and we can see in our very, very early days of life and childhood where someone influenced who we are today. Who is that for you?
It's I try and take something from everyone. There are probably two examples. One obviously was my parents. Um, First generation college for both of them. And, I think what they left me with, and I think it served me very well, especially through the first part of my life, is Todd, focus, get an education. If you get an education, it'll open doors. And once you get it, it's something no one can take away from you. So I got in a lot of trouble here and there, but I also, the one thing I did was always put in extra cycles on that work and always tried to get to the toughest classes, the best schools, and to apply myself as much as possible. And I think that opened up doors that would not have been otherwise open considering where I came from.
Yeah.
The other one, it was interesting. And I've got a note. I was talking to my wife the other day. I've got to reach out to this gentleman, but I had a coach in high school. I love soccer, as you and I were talking about before the call. But I figured out I was actually good at running and had a path to running college. And I had this coach in my junior year. He was a new coach in, and he took over a cross country team that didn't have a really good reputation, and I had joined it the year before. So you kind of had that you better prove it. And it was interesting. He was someone that one day after practice, and it was track season, it wasn't cross country. I said, "Look, coach, I'm coming to all these events. Why am I not getting a shot? I'm doing everything I can." And he did two things. One, he stepped back and said, "I made a judgment based on the team that you came from. And you're right, I'm not seeing that in you." And two, he gave me an opportunity that to the extent that I could prove myself, I would get opportunities, which I think one opened up doors for me to prove myself, but more importantly, as a leader, to look back and one, recognize his humility in that statement and the opportunity to give me a chance. So those were probably the two. And I do have to reach out to him. I think he's coaching
There
somewhere
you
in Northern
go.
Ohio at a university now. But
So what personal values have guided you from the start?
there have been a few, one of which is integrity. And everyone says that, and it's cliche, but I would say in business and human life, if you lose trust, it's very hard to regain. And you know, I think too, it's when you break that, it's a diminishment of yourself. And it's not that you don't make mistakes, and there haven't like, I'll be careful on this because I don't think any children, but of course, like the stories that you tell your children when it comes time for a major holiday in December, we all did that. But you also recognize, I was when I was at the Coast Guard Academy, one of the phrases that kept sticking to me is "tell the truth even to your detriment." And that I think has stuck with me and something I have always worked hard to do. It's not always easy to do. But that stuck with me. I think the other one is if you're putting yourself at the front of everything, you're not doing things for the right reason. And this will be a Coast Guard value once again, where I think you kind of come out of high school and you're a teenager, and we can get into that. There are a lot of idiot moves as a teenager, and having raised two boys reinforced that when they were in high school that you can go down that path. But uh, Coast Guard struck in me mission, crew, self. And if you think in those ways, one, you're having the right impact and doing the right things when you put those objectives ahead of you. And two, it actually leads to better decisions and it leads to better outcomes. And the people around that matter normally realize what you're doing. And so it's not that it's without your own benefit, but I think it's you can always see through when someone's really acting on their own. And I think the third big thing that comes out to me is the realization we're here for a limited time. The things that matter in this world go away really quickly. I don't know if it was when you and I met, but I was talking to someone recently. I mean, for most of us in two generations, no one's going to memorize or going to remember our name. Um, so it's not about title. It's not about money. It's about impact in a way that is good for the people around you. And the deeper I've gotten in my career, the more that has become important. The deeper I go in my life and the experiences, but the successes and the absolute tragedies reinforce that.
Where has life asked you to slow down recently?
Oh, slow down. That is a good question. Let me just think for a minute because it merits a thoughtful answer. I, it's interesting. I don't want to get into it, but we talk about absolute tragedies. We went through something like that about 6 years ago, and I pray and hope that kind of thing doesn't befall anyone on this call. But when you realize that the things that matter most in your life can be taken away from you in an instant, it does cause you to reflect and realize that this world's not about you. You're here for a reason, and that reason is to have a purpose that elevates those around you, that brings forward progress in the world, that leaves the world a better place, right? There's a quote, what kind of man, and you can say what kind of woman is given something and does not make it better. I that's part of the slowdown in making sure you're doing that, but that statement also haunts me as something that kind of propels how I think about going forward.
Mhm. So tell me, have you had to make a decision recently that required you to act before you were ready?
Not it's funny, not I I believe it's interesting. I I would flip it. I think at this age, I believe that situations are put in front of you for a reason at a time. So whether you're ready or not, it's the right decision, and it's important to look at those signals and lean in and be as ready as possible when it happens. And if it's in the moment, to, exercise good judgment to the best of your extent you can, to engage your network, to bring in others, because it does take a village, and ideas get better the more people you get involved. That battle of ideas, and then to also rely on the experience that you've collected across a life. So when I find myself in those situations, I try to call the moment, take it as a gift, and try and make the best of it.
There you go. There you go. How has your relationship with risk changed as this business has been moving along?
Yeah, yeah. It's what is it? Fortune favors the brave, I think, is a quote that's out there. Um, if the opportunity's there and you're unwilling to take the risk, you're unworthy of the risk. Now, on the flip side, as an entrepreneur, um, the risk goes straight back to you and your family. So you don't want to be reckless about it. Um, I am thoughtful, I am careful. I try to analyze situations for my clients, for my business, for myself. But you also have to realize that the opportunity is there for a reason. So be thoughtful, but nothing of merit, nothing worthwhile was ever accomplished
Hmm. Hmm.
without risk.
So tell me this, how does Todd lead when he's not sure of himself?
I like open dialogue. I grew up. Everyone talks about Midwest nice. I believe we need to be polite, but I also believe we need to be blunt. The more uncertain I am of a course of action, the more feedback I try to get. And what you find there is, sometimes your intuition's right, and it's validated through those discussions, even when you disagree with people, right? Someone can disagree with you and it can strengthen your resolve. Someone can disagree with you and you can go, oh, that's a much better idea, or oh, I was wrong. So I think it's about making sure that you have diverse perspectives, the right voices around you. It's important to have a network. People call it your board of directors, but people with different perspectives, ideally people who genuinely care about you, are the best. But that's not always the case, and those aren't always the right people in the room. Sometimes you just need expertise. But really trying to get people around you who will give it to you straight, uh, preferably politely. Doesn't have to be. I try to be polite, but I want people to challenge those ideas. So that the less you know about something, the more tension and healthy conflict that you need. If you're The worst thing I realized, and when I was young, I liked leadership teams that were aligned. You're like, we're all in the same boat. And then you start getting into richer and richer problem sets, and you realize that's absolutely the wrong kind of people to put around you. Like, not calling, you don't want jerks on the team that kill dialogue, but you certainly want people that are going to make you and other people on the team feel uncomfortable from time to time. Because if you have that and you have an ability to work through that in a way that's respectful, oh man, that opens up the aperture to do a lot
Yeah.
of really good
Yes.
things.
Yes. Yes. You know,
That's something too. I want to be honest. I mean, you learn that lesson by screwing things up,
yes.
right? You learn that lesson through your mistake, because the seductive aspect of we're all in agreement. This is great. We're all of one mind. That feels good. And what is it? Beware of things that are too easy and feel good in life. You say that when you're young, but you don't understand it until you get a little bit deeper in your
Yeah.
career and your life.
I know some of my biggest mistakes have turned out to be my biggest successes, but boy, were they a
Yeah.
learning material along that journey. So tell me this, Todd, how do you recognize when fear is information versus a stop sign?
Fear is always information. A stop sign is one of the potential outcomes. Um, and I'll go back. I Fear is tough for me, and this may come across a little. When I was young and I was in the service and I was in the coast, I lost my fear of other people. I gained respect for the capacity that every individual can have to exercise good or evil, and the fact that they may have advantages over you and they may not. But I also believe there's always a way. And that go back to the David and Goliath story. None of us are invulnerable and none of us are too strong. So that kind of took away the fear, and it's just a situation. Um, the event that I mentioned earlier took away all fears of everything else and just realized that life is going to play out its course. I would change to concern. And the heightened concern increases it's usually an indication of a increased level of potential upside and potential downside. And that's where back to my point, are you pulling in the right people? Are you endeavoring to execute good judgment? Are you being relentless on executing the skill set and leveraging the experiences that you've had for life? That is a time for increased focus and energy. One outcome could be stop. One outcome could be, I know you're tired. I know your legs ache, but bring in this last 100 meters, run faster, run faster. And so I use it more as a way to make sure it's getting due attention, right? It's more of a siren
Hmm.
than anything else. It's going
Yes.
off. It's a bright flashing light that says this is really, really critical.
So tell me this, Todd, what impact are you most proud of? Not publicly, not professionally, but personally.
My children. Yeah. And probably for two reasons, right? Back to you're given something and can you make it better? I'm at a point where I was able to see the growth and maturation of my children. I was able to see that it wasn't just me, but it was a partnership and collaboration with my wife, coaches, teachers, grandparents, uncles, aunts. So to be able to see that come together, and this is the same kind of thing you would see in business. And, I'm at a point now where, it's interesting. And I was talking to my youngest son over the weekend where they're imparting wisdom to you and to be able to see that.
Yeah.
So personally, and I don't think that's probably a unique statement. I think if you put 100 people on here, if 100 people had kids, probably 99 people would tell you my children.
You're
So that's
absolutely correct.
probably not, you're like, Todd, give me more here, but that's the honest answer. But I would see the same pattern and framework works across, like the business example for me is when someone that you worked with 20, 25 years ago calls you on a Saturday and says, I'm about to make a big decision. I want your input. And you're like, wow, I haven't heard from him or her for
Yes.
10 years. But to know that you had that kind of impact on them, and two, you earned that trust is it's rewarding, but it's also back to your point about the siren. It's also kind of a signal that, well, there's an obligation associated with this. There is, if they're calling you, there's a real obligation to make sure that you are showing up in the right way and putting their interests first in the dialogue.
Yes.
Which, back to the kids.
I
You
love
have
when those
kids.
happen. Those.
Their interest should always come before you use, and that might mean you're grounded. I'm taking away your PSP or video game or whatever. It doesn't always have to be nice, but or what they wanted, but it has to be in their best interest.
Yeah, I love those calls when we get them from people in our past. Tell me this, what boundary has become essential to your sustainability?
Mm. I My boundary, I'm very selective on who I allow to get close to me. What's the old quote? You're a product of the five people with whom you spend the most time. You want people that hold you to high account for yourself. You want people that will challenge you. You want people that can put things aside and put your interests first as they're advising and helping you. And you want people who look at you and say, if you're not doing that, I'm not going to waste any time with you either, Todd. So it goes back to that reciprocity. And you see that in business. I mean, there was a time where so and so title this and that. And I've had opportunities over the last few years with some pretty well connected people that earlier in my career I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm eating dinner with this individual and I'm doing this. And now I'm kind of like, I heard enough from this discussion. I wish you well, but I'm not going to follow up. Yeah, this is not where I want to be spending my time.
Have you ever said no to growth because it wasn't aligned?
Yeah, yeah. If you look at my career transitions, most people would look and go, "What was he doing?" Like I left Deloitte uh, right as I was in the process of making partner. I think the senior partner in the practice said, "You know what you're walking away from," and that's a funny story. If we want to get into it, my wife actually applied for my job at Fidelity for me. That's a funny story, but it was partially family and partially career. Um, when I left Fidelity, it was an incredibly good role to go into retail. And and I took roles at Fidelity where there was no guarantee of a follow on. Come in, help us look at this, work across. If it goes well, we'll figure it out. But there was no job at the end. And certainly leaving the role I had at my last employer and the discussion I had with the CEO of Kroger at the time when I left would have led people to go, is he out of his mind? Um, I I think when you make these pivots, if you're not leaving something behind, if you're not stepping away from something that's valuable, you're probably not making a courageous enough decision.
Mhm. What's the biggest vision coming up for Aurora Insights?
I think the biggest vision for me is when you look, and there was a report out by McKinsey at the end of last year, and keep in mind they skew towards the larger companies, but I'm seeing it even on a more exaggerated scale as you go into mid market. The statement was, while I think something like 90%, my quotes could be off a little bit here, but the go with me thematically are using AI, but only about 8% are seeing about a 5% more impact on EBITDA through AI. That that is well, that's an interesting business quote, and people talk about it. But when you really peel that back and you look, what does that mean? That means a lot of companies out there are at risk. A lot of companies out there are facing massive disruption at the hands of outside forces because they're not able to muster an understanding of this capability that's very powerful and transformative,
Hmm.
but their competitors are. So what does that do? That puts people at risk in roles. That puts shareholders, and everyone goes shareholders. That's big financial service. But 401ks are right? Our money is in 401ks so that we can retire and live our life with dignity. So I think there is a lot of disruption out there. Aurora is about helping individual companies, but it's also about being able to really take and scale. And that's my word here. Aurora is looking to impact and scale that expertise that right now only exists, if you look at the McKinsey study, in a small number of companies, and be able to expose that more broadly to leaders so that they can bring their companies, their people, their customers, and their owners along through this process with less disruption in a way that allows them to do what they do. Every company exists because it's doing something good, right? It's offering a service that someone wants. Good is a tough term. We can argue that, but they exist there because they're offering a product that someone wants. So clearly there's a market need for what they're doing. My job is to help leadership teams understand how to transform their business at this disruptive moment in time in a way that allows them to do it graciously and gracefully, as opposed to negatively and potentially find themselves out of business due to competitors who've figured it out.
Wow. What does renewal look like for Todd beyond rest or a day off? How do you renew yourself?
I spend time with friends and family. It's important for me to connect and to kind of separate and distance myself from work because you and I talked about this, right? As you're growing businesses and starting businesses, you're on all day, every day. You're always thinking about it. You're not counting on anyone else to figure out your business. So I think getting that separation is very important. I also have found the older I get, I have routines, and they're on my calendar, right? I get up in the morning, I pray, I read philosophy, and then I exercise. And those things put me in a position where I can make better decisions on a more grounded level, right? You're grounding yourself in the morning, then you're exercising to give you the energy. And, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you just go, go, go. But you're also operating at that time without a lot of wisdom, and the expectations for wisdom are less. I think as you get older, having the right routines around you and getting refreshed at the right time is really important.
Yeah.
I'm also an avid reader. I can get lost in a book, and not as everyone talks about technology. I have books behind me, but I have a library downstairs. Like I like paper, and I like to turn pages, and that's an area I can get lost as well.
Yeah, I'm one of those people like that. I like to dirty up the book myself sometimes. So
Pencils and highlighters.
yeah, yeah,
Someday, after I'm gone, my son's going to be looking through there and going, "What was he thinking?" All these
yeah. It's great, right?
mechanical pencil marks and outlines and questions challenging what's written. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have, I've even bought books where people have done that in them before, and I look at them and go, I didn't even see that now that I read that, right? So
Yeah.
tell me this, what does legacy mean to you at this stage of life?
Ah, it means a few things. I think as you look at business and community, I'm finding myself more and more saying that nonprofit is not something on the side, but it's part of the business. It's part of, when you think of the business, it's Aurora Insights, but broader than that, it's Toddco, right? And I don't prioritize that secondarily. I prioritize it as part of what I want to do. So from a business perspective, you've been given the gift of having expertise and experience. Where are you applying that in places where that kind of expertise and experience is needed but can't be against missions and objectives that help make your communities better, help make the world better, help mitigate suffering? So, that's the chapter I'm in for business. Ultimately I hope to be in a chapter where like maybe I have grandkids bouncing around on my knees, but right now that's there. I think on a personal level, um, I want people around me to know that they were loved, whether they be friends. It's funny as you get older, and I was a sailor, the amount of calls with people I've known for a while where it ends with "I love you, brother," as opposed to I just talk to you later. I want people to know that I genuinely care about them, and it was not represented through my words, but it was represented through my actions. And
Yeah.
like all of us, some days you do that well, some days you look back and go, "Ah, that wasn't that wasn't who I wanted to
Yeah,
be."
yeah.
Yeah.
I think both are important.
Yeah. But
Uh,
legacy and stuff like back to my comment earlier, I think the realization, 2 generations after we leave this planet, no one's going to know our name. And you go back, name all the Roman emperors, name all the kings of England. Can't do it. Doesn't matter. Most people can't name all the presidents. So, I think the idea of a legacy where your name carries on, that doesn't appeal to me.
yeah, yes, we talked about that earlier. So tell me this, Todd. If a very, very much younger Todd were watching this podcast we're recording, what would you tell him?
I would, a few things. Um, be more patient. Um, while you're growing a family and business is important, but make sure you show up for other people at all times in a way that matters. The excuse of I'm on a business trip and I couldn't be there, I would have scrutinized that a lot more.
Mm,
Um, and I think the other thing I would say is all those extra cycles you put in were worthwhile. There's a compounding benefit to work. And I translated this recently. Someone asked a question of what would you tell, 20, and what was one thing you would tell? And one of the things I told him was I gave the analogy. The British Navy in the 17th and 18th century, best in the world. And it wasn't because of the island character of the nation. There was nothing about being British that was better than being anyone else. The trees on the British Isle weren't better. The ships weren't better. But the reason they dominated, they spent more time at sea and they fired more cannonballs. It's as simple as that. They got more reps. Or for the people that are in the gym, 10 extra minutes on the treadmill, one extra set. It pays off over time.
mm, 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 mm. If your story could leave the listeners today with one invitation, what would it be?
One invitation. You're in a role in life for a reason. And you bring unique skills. You bring unique experience. You have an approach that is distinctly you. We all use that for the obvious benefit of we have a job, we're going to do the job, be that in the house, in work. But I would say the invitation is find a way to do it in a way that makes something outside of that job a little bit better, makes someone feel better, imparts some wisdom,
Mhm.
allows you to have a broader impact, maybe a more, especially with AI, a more ethical outcome to the sciences that you're putting in place. Think just beyond the task and the deliverable. How can your skills be used
Mhm.
to have back to that point, even just a slightly better, more generous, more loving impact? Try and find a way to do it. And I say that too. Some days I do it, some days I don't, right? We all have good and bad days. There are days like, oh, that was good, but more days than not, I'm writing down a list at the end of the day of things I could have done better. But that would be my wisdom. How do you use those skills in a way that's distinctly you to go beyond just the job to have a broader and bigger impact? And if we do that, we're going to end up with a much
Thank
better world. The other thing too, patience. We all come from different perspectives. Um, it's okay to be strict with yourself, and this has been a learning that I don't even think I acknowledged till about 10 years ago. But be strict with yourself, patient with others.
Yes, yes, thank you. Todd James, CEO of Aurora Insights, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. How can we find you?
So you can find me. Easy to look me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I have a strong perspective on what's happening with AI. And you can also check out my website, which is aurorainsightsllc.com. And you're like, Todd, that's long. I did see I could buy Aurora, but it costs at least $2 million. So I went with
There
aurorainsightsllc.com.
you go.
But feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to engage in a dialogue. I'm pretty active on there.
Todd, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today.
Thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure of a discussion. I really like where the discussion went.
Yes, thank you. And to my viewers, this is Tom Lenoble, and I'll see you next time.